God of Slaughter, Chapter 797. Rainbow light shot out everywhere from the center of the combined 5 forbidden areas. Gaps between those beams were visible. Feng Rao, Ganji, and Peng Jia stayed hidden in the gaps, looking at the turtle shell with a grim countenance. They started to use their energy to pull it. However, Feng Rao's sound power and Ganji's Peng Jia's special powers were all useless. Peng Jia shrank his body 10 times. He became just 1/10 of the size of a normal adult. He swayed between the beams to go closer to the shell. Then, he extended his index finger, resizing it to be as small as a needle to inch towards and touch the turtle shell. Unfortunately, when his needle-like index finger approached the hard shell, a strange energy wave shot out. The ceasing light started to change. A rainbow light shot out like a ribbon, piercing through his index finger. Peng Jia retreated rapidly. His body was now even smaller than a dwarf. He couldn't help but shiver. When his index finger resumed its normal size, it was broken and bleeding. Peng Jia was frightened. He didn't dare try anymore, retreating to a place far away and using medicine to apply to his wound. His eyes had a look of distress. His power was considered to have many advantages among the 3 of them. However, no matter how careful he was, he still got injured. This frightened him a lot. He didn't dare act rashly anymore. Ganji and Feng Rao thought of no solutions. Their eyes glued to that strange shell, unable to conceal the desires in their heart. Anyway, they had no solution for this headache-given matter. Shi Yan was still musing. He looked like he wasn't planning to take any action besides simply glaring at that shell. He didn't know what it was, but he knew for sure that the halo twirling around that hard shell could pierce through any kind of matter. Even if he got his god body at its greatest peak, he didn't dare try. After a while, they had made no progress. Feng Rao, Ganji, and Peng Jia frowned, raked through their fantasy sky rings, and criticizing each other. Their words became more malignant and sinister. They seemed like they would burst out fighting each other any time soon. The exquisite azure drawings on Feng Rao's smooth, white skin started to move when she was enraged, giving her a bizarre beauty. Although Shi Yan was busy, he looked nonchalant. He eyed the woman, Ganji, and Peng Jia without haste. Compared to the other 3, he looked more like an onlooker, someone who didn't care about what the results would be. I wonder if the jade token works, Feng Rao pondered for a while. She seemed to have something in her mind. She rose her hand and grabbed something. The cube stone on Handi's body flew up immediately, falling precisely into her jade palm, combining with the one she had. Ganji and Peng Jia got it. They frowned and threw her their square stones with a dark face. Shi Yan watched and found that their 4 square stones were exactly the same as Zhang Ji's stone. They seemed to make a key. The 4 stones combined to reveal the shape of a key. Feng Rao's group had their eyes brighten up as if they had finally found a solution they had never thought possible. They became excited looking at Shi Yan and shouting in unison. "Where's yours?" "Arg." Shi Yan couldn't help but beam a forced smile. He shook his head under their intense looks, showed them his hands and shrugged. "I'm sorry. I don't have it. Zhang Ji didn't give you the stone." Feng Rao's beautiful eyes sparkled brutally. She was enraged. She thought that they could solve it finally, but now the problem was Shi Yan. Ganji and Peng Jie darkened their faces. The murderous intent in their eyes was obvious. 3 different auras slithered like invisible toxic snakes surrounding Shi Yan. If he made a wrong move, they would kill him instantly. Shi Yan was stern inwardly. He couldn't hold his snort. He was staying the furthest from the source of the rainbow light. Shi Yan moved quickly to the gap nearest to him. He gathered his energy to prepare for a battle with the rage of the other 3. Feng Rao, Ganji, and Peng Jie had laid all of their hopes on the cube stones. Now they had 4 stones connected to each other and formed the shape of a key. It just needed one more piece to complete this key, which seemed to be able to open the way to that hard shell. The only exit was erased by Shi Yan's words. Of course, they were enraged. Their looks with the brutal intentions as thick as black ink were aimed at Shi Yan coldly. Shi Yan's god soul suddenly got extremely agitated. He continually urged space power in his sea of consciousness. Flows of soul consciousness with space energy twirled around his sea of consciousness and covered his soul altar. The surging agitation gradually vanished. The soul confinement that the other 3 planted on his soul was ineffective. A strange light sparkled in Feng Rao's exquisite and eccentric face. Her eyes blinked as she stooped and sighed. Not bad. You can dodge our soul confinement. No wonder why you aren't afraid at all. Seems like we've underestimated you. I don't have it, really. Even if you kill me, it's no use. Shi Yan smiled miserably. What about getting out there and bringing Zhang Jie back here? *CK it. Do you think we have so much time? Do you think you can get out of the extreme purgatory field that easy? Peng Jie couldn't help but scold loudly. Shi Yan, that is the undying wood. It is not the turtle shell like you thought. Shortly, a soul popped up in his sea of consciousness. The vermilion bird True Flame was talking to him. I have the vermilion bird's knowledge. The undying wood's really marvelous. It's the top treasure of the wood class in the 5 elements. It's tougher than the toughest metal. There's no sharp weapon that could cut it. Undying wood. Shi Yan was cautious discreetly. He was moved. Besides its hardness, what are its other characteristics? Strange treasure. Undying wood of the wood class has the magical but natural wooden texture. With this magical texture, the blacksmith with supernatural power could portray the formations according to that wood texture to create the most unimaginable and subtle abilities. Can I approach it? Didn't you take in a large amount of wood essence G in the last barrier you've just broken? Use that essence G to cover your entire body and try, the vermilion bird True Flame told him. My information comes from the vermilion bird before he left the Grace mainland. We don't have deeper knowledge about the undying wood yet, so it is not clear enough. I heard that the undying wood comes from a divine tree after it became rotten. But this piece isn't rotten, so it's called undying wood. Extremely strange, right? The undying wood comes from a rotten divine tree. The tree was rotten but its wood wasn't rotten. What kind of logic was that? Shi Yan was surprised. He listened to the heaven flame attentively. He suddenly had a strange feeling that the creation of the undying wood contains some truth of nature. The wood texture barrier you've broken simulates the natural texture of the undying wood. Since you've got it magically, Can you condense it and use it to cover your body entirely? At least, you can cover one arm of yours to touch it, continued the vermilion bird True Flame. Shi Yan was astounded for a while. He instinctively tried as he was told. He urged and drew the wood essence Qi from his flesh and bone, trying to pour it into one arm. His arm became brown and gray just like a dried tree trunk. It looked a bit strange to him. At this moment, the sinister looks of Feng Rao, Peng Jie, and Ganji still gazed at Shi Yan tightly. The murderous intent was so heavy that it could burst in any minute. "Don't act rashly, you guys," Shi Yan suddenly shouted, his face solemn. "Wait a minute and give me time to try. I'm a blacksmith. I have knowledge of formations and barriers. This is why I was able to break the barriers faster than you guys. Yeah, it's the barrier that creates those fatal light beams. Let me try." Feng Rao's group halted, their faces astounded. They knew something was happening in that central area, so they knew it wasn't the barrier like Shi Yan had said. They doubted his words. However, they were shaken upon hearing that Shi Yan wanted to try. They thought that in the worst case, Shi Yan would be crushed into pieces in that source of light. In that case, they didn't need to do anything to erase him, and they could even have a chance to observe the bursting energy of that fatal source. The three agreed tacitly. They stopped gathering energy and just gave a snort while watching Shi Yan move. "Keep your eye on the three for me." A thought was sent and the heaven flames started to fly around his soul altar. They accumulated energy and waited for a chance. More wood essence Qi was urged out of his body and created a layer covering him entirely. Shortly, he became a shriveled tree log, his entire body brown and gray like a rotten tree. In this special form, he carefully touched the light beams next to him. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. Contact between the light and his finger created strange sounds. The sharp light seemed to be softened magically. The tremendous piercing power vanished. Shi Yan was excited. A bright smile hung on the corner of his mouth. Ganji, Feng Rao, and Peng Jie noticed his moves. Divine light sparkled gloriously in their eyes as they gawked disbelievingly. Shi Yan laughed contentedly while shooting like a brown light towards the undying wood. He didn't bother with the scorching looks of the other three burning his back. Beams of light shining on his body were all softened. When the steam arose on all over his body, Shi Yan descended right over the undying wood. He didn't say anything but grabbed it fiercely. Tens of thousands of rainbow beams disappeared into the undying wood at the moment his fingers touched the piece of wood. The undying wood became simple and natural, but it was as heavy as a mountain. The subtle, exquisite wood texture of this piece looked like a strange but magical star map. Peng Jie, Ganji, and Feng Rao's eyes reddened instantly. They didn't say anything but released their god domains, dashing toward Shi Yan at their max speed. 3 waves of formidable energy swept over like 3 meteors shooting across the sky with an imposing momentum. Rumble, 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 rumble. Shattering and collapsing sounds echoed from the 5 palaces. The earth cracked. The mountain shook and collapsed. The barrier covering this area was torn apart. Immense gray mist flooded into the place furiously. The strange magnetic field of the extreme purgatory field vanished into thin air.